Always enjoyed these types of events. Hope everybody's had a great day so far. We still got a lot ahead, and happy to do my little piece of this puzzle. So it's about time. Let's get discussing the topic. It's about time we talk about generative AI, because we probably haven't talked about it enough here. Now, from a governance and security perspective this time. So the session's called Taming the Wild West. At least we'll get started on it. So just a quick introduction. My name is Tatu Seppälä. I'm a security architect working in a company called Sulava in Finland, working to design security solutions for our customers. And I've been involved in a lot of Microsoft 365 Copilot adoption projects as the security architect. So a lot of this practical, experience comes from the requirements of those projects alongside other research. So I'm also Microsoft MVP in Purview. Not that means much, but yeah, let's get to the topic. So I kind of wanted to do this session because in experiences in the field, I saw like a certain pattern emerging every time we started working with a new customer. And it went something like, this. The customer goes all in on Microsoft 365 Copilot. We do an adoption project with the customer. Everything goes fine. They start using Copilot. They're excited, but there's always a certain segment of the organization that says, I like ChatGPT better. I'm going to use that, and nothing's stopping them. And to be honest, I don't think stopping is the right answer. Or there's somebody who says, I'm used to using Gemini and I want to use that. And that's kind of the special thing with these generative AI services, is that fairly few of us actually learn to interact with them for the first time with these enterprise-ready solutions. For most of us, probably, that were in early on, it was ChatGPT, and for a lot of the later comers as well. Maybe for a lot of folks, Gemini will be their first exposure to generative AI. As kind of humans, that we kind of do, we like to use what's familiar, right? We don't necessarily use the shiny new thing just because it's there. We like to use what we know and trust to a certain extent. So that kind of brings us to the issue here today that I'm going to try to unpack how to approach, which is that you might buy fancy licenses for enterprise-ready solutions like Microsoft 365 Copilot, but that doesn't mean people are just going to stop using what they're used to using. All of those other generative AI services that are shipping your data, who knows where, the consumer ones. Really, our goal is not to stop, but to redirect. If people have a need, they'll get it done. So today, I'll take you through the prep of what I usually do for customers, the technical prep, how to run some early discovery of existing usage trends to get that shadow GenAI use surfaced, how to kind of separate services based on risk, and the fact that no matter how many cool technical solutions we offer, people are always going to do what's easy. I'm going to touch on that a little bit. And what risk-based controls I typically implement, and what I think is smart to implement, how to monitor that, and touching a little bit on mobile devices and what's next, with some action points at the end. It's a tight 45 minutes, but I hope you'll enjoy. And if you have any questions, you can reach me after the session on LinkedIn or mainly LinkedIn, I think, guess for most of you, or through my blog. So feel free to come interact. All right, let's start preparations. So if you want to really get a grip on these shadow GenAI services, the first thing you'll need is a couple of tools from the Defender toolbox, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud Apps, and a little bit from Microsoft Purview as well. So the very first thing I'd actually do is onboard your Windows 10, Windows 11, Mac OS devices to Defender for Endpoint. This is for later. Defender for Endpoint can do a whole lot of things. We're not going to touch on the whole toolkit here, but we do need the devices in Defender for Endpoint through Intune, through configuration manager, a whole wide array of different deployment options are there. But get those devices in there. That's because a lot of what's coming in the future relies on the devices being enrolled in the Defender for Endpoint. All right, after enrolling devices, onboarding devices into Defender for Endpoint, we're going to want to configure a few things. In Defender for Endpoint settings in the security portal, we're going to want to make sure that the integration with Defender for Cloud Apps is actually turned on. It needs to be turned on separately. And alongside that, another setting called custom network indicators needs to be on as well. Both of these set up the crucial integration with Defender for Cloud Apps that we're going to need to set up those guardrails. So those two settings, Defender for Cloud Apps integration with Defender for Endpoint and custom network indicators. Then we hop onto the Defender for Endpoint settings in the Defender for Cloud Apps settings, and configure one more thing. The Defender for Endpoint settings in the Defender for Cloud Apps. We want to configure enforce app access. This is a setting that kind of enables Defender for Cloud Apps and Defender for Endpoint to work together in a way you're going to see soon, to give us some control on those shadow GenAI services, granular control. After configuring these prerequisites and having that Defender for Endpoint onboarding done for your devices, you can take a chill pill and rest a little bit because you want data to accumulate. Once you've done the onboarding and set up that integration, Defender for Endpoint will start looking at network traffic on your devices to a variety of services. We're going to see what that looks like soon. But I'd say wait at least a week, if you can, a month, let data accumulate, do some other stuff. A couple of things you can do while waiting. You can take onboarding all the way, go to the Purview portal and turn on device onboarding there. It's this little blue button settings. That will tell Purview it can actually bring in all those devices from Defender for Endpoint automatically. This is crucial because it enables a couple of other audit events and the ability to use endpoint data loss prevention, which we'll get into. So first Defender for Endpoint onboarding, then Purview onboarding, which is automatic through Defender for Endpoint. This sets up the prerequisites nicely. Just one more thing or two, actually. Once you have those devices in Purview, you'll also want to deploy what's called the Purview browser extension. It's available for Edge, it's available for Chrome, and it is available also for Firefox. This browser extension is crucial because it gives us the ability to gather signals of generative AI service use outside of Microsoft ecosystem. So this is one of those pieces that's often neglected, but it also, by the way, expands some controls we're talking about here today, the endpoint DLP controls to Chrome and Firefox, which would otherwise be black boxes. So get that browser extension deployed. And one more thing before you can really rest and wait for the data to gather is you want to create something called an endpoint data loss prevention policy. That's in the Purview portal. You can create all kinds of data loss prevention DLP policies. But what I do is I create a new one exclusively for devices. This is an endpoint DLP policy when it's scoped to devices, where I either target all users or perhaps a smaller group I'm interested in. What I do here is I set up at least a couple of rules, usually based on sensitivity labels for documents mainly, where I perhaps look at documents that are confidential, that are possibly uploaded to certain cloud services. We want to use this endpoint DLP rule to find out when people are uploading business data essentially to generative AI services. So we'll set up a rule, something like this. We look at any files on the enrolled Purview onboarded endpoints that have a sensitivity label of confidential. for example. And for activities, we want to control uploading documents to cloud domains. By default, we'll only audit, meaning audit logs are generated, but no action is taken. But we'll also do something to target generative AI apps specifically. We'll go under choose different restrictions for sensitive service domains, and we'll add a group. Now, when you go here right now, even if you haven't set anything up, you'll have already this group of domains called generative AI websites. This is something Microsoft maintains. I can drop a link to this at the end of the session. It's a expanding list of 400, 500 GenAI services that Microsoft maintains. You can automatically target this with controls in endpoint DLP. We'll say that if confidential files are uploaded to one of these, then the control is blocked with override. You're going to see what this looks like in a bit. And I've created a group of my own with some of my own domains like the intranet that I'll similarly just allow. Now, we won't actually, at the beginning, we will only run this in what's called simulation mode. So we gather data, but don't actually control anything yet. We don't want to disrupt production. But you're going to want to create this policy and rule as early as possible to gather data. Now, if you're actually on the E5, Microsoft 365 E5 level in licensing, I'll encourage you to actually go to the Data Security Posture Management for AI, DSPM for AI, really rolls off the tongue. This tool in the Purview portal, it's a pretty easy way to get additional visibility once you have the browser extension deployed. They encourage you to create a bunch of pre-made policies to just gather data on all kinds of, non-Microsoft AI solution usage. So if you go in here, there's a button called Extend Your Insights. Click that, click Create Policies, and it'll set up policies in data loss prevention and tools like insider risk management to gather information. That's it. So optional, but I encourage you doing that. All right, that was a bit of heavy prerequisites on paper at least, but ultimately fast to set up. Once you have all that, you're pretty much set. So let's say you waited around for a month. When you come back to the Defender portal, you can start doing discovery. So here's what I do. I go to the Defender portal, security.microsoft.com. I go under Cloud Apps, and I take a peek under Cloud Discovery. Now, here's what's been happening for the last month after you deployed. All of those Defender for Endpoint enrolled workstations have been reporting back to Defender for Cloud Apps on all of the usage for different kinds of cloud apps people have been accessing and transferring data to. You'll get a long list and you'll get some nice surprises. Why are so many people using such and such service? The fun part here is that they categorize all of these services your organization actually uses. They categorize them in a variety of categories: cloud storage, security, IT services. But there's also a category for generative AI. So when you filter the so-called Cloud Discovery catalog in Defender for Cloud Apps for generative AI, you'll get all of the various generative AI services your organization has actually been using, apart from the ones you think they're using. So, for example, this organization, plenty of Microsoft 365 Copilot usage, licenses have been bought, but there's still a good third of the workforce still using ChatGPT as well. Maybe we don't want to ban ChatGPT or anything like that, but we certainly didn't know that many people were using it. All right, so oftentimes we find all kinds of shady services, including not shady, but based in China, maybe like DeepSeek, that we want to take action on. So you'll want to take a little peek. How is the organization actually using generative AI services? You'll find all sorts, almost certainly. When you find these services, you're going to want to take a look at the risk score. We'll get to that in a little bit. Not just the score, but the closer details on each app. This Defender of Cloud Apps Microsoft has modeled a whole bunch of services and gathered information about those services with the help of the service provider, evaluating security aspects like whether or not the user can actually upload organizational data to the service. So, and whether the service is compliant with GDPR or other regulation. For example, ChatGPT, according to them, is. let's see if it holds water. So that's kind of some preliminary discovery I always do. Just look at the data and ask some questions from the business. Do you know you're using this service? Do you know you're using Grammarly? Do you have a real role for read speaker? Who's using it? Why? Is it authorized or not? To get a grip, kind of an idea on why these services are being used. Maybe it's just a lack of understanding of the fact that there's an authorized solution as well. So you've also been gathering unified audit log data from onboarding devices to Defender, which is nice, and Purview, which is nice because now you can go to, and this is what I always do, you can go to the security portal and the tool called Advanced Hunting. This lets you query the audit logs and do all kinds of transformations and mining insights from them. If you want the exact query used in the image, by the way, hit me up. It's in my blog publicly, so you can use it. Here's an example query where we can pull the last 30 days events where people uploaded data to the cloud and kind of cross-reference job titles. So we can ask questions like, why are graphic designers uploading over 100 files per month in ChatGPT when they have Microsoft 365 Copilot? Maybe they like the image editing tools better, but maybe that's not something we want. So the information is all there, and you can access it with Advanced Hunting. That said, you have to learn some KQL, custom query language, to actually use this tool. But if you have tools like Microsoft 365 Copilot, it actually writes KQL pretty well. Just tell it what you want. So it's surprisingly good. All right. So since you can see now what services your organization is using, or the organization you're working with, what I usually do next is I start kind of finding out the services that are most risky that are being currently used. I already touched on this a little bit. What I like to do is use Cloud Discovery, look at those existing services and adjust the filters a little bit. Maybe tweak the risk score a little bit. This is kind of an aggregate score of all the factors that go into determining the risk level of the app. Maybe look at apps with a risk score of 6 or lower. It's a considerably shorter list. In this case, there weren't a lot of users but I've seen really risky apps with tens, in one case over 100 users in a large organization. And maybe just the risk score isn't alone enough. What I like to look at also are some of the security risk factors. So there's a drop-down menu for security risk factors. We want to look at only the services where users can upload data as well that are also risky in other ways. Really handy way to drill down. So now we can ask some really pointed questions. Why are these services being used? Do people know about the official systems that they're supposed to be using? Is there a feature gap there? And to be honest, I'd look at all, the risk score is not infallible, so I would just look at all of the GenAI services based on which services you can upload data to a lot of the time, and see how much each service data has been uploaded to, in aggregate. Sometimes it's gigabytes, tens of gigabytes of stuff. into a consumer service. Those are always fun discussions. All right, so the cloud discovery view in Defender for Cloud Apps is what I use to understand what's currently being used. But let's say you want to take a stance on services even before someone starts using them. DeepSeek was a pretty big example in Europe where organizations wanted to preemptively say no to this specific cloud service even before someone got the idea of using it. So for this, I would go to the Defender for Cloud Apps Cloud App Catalog. This is a second view where you have the whole scope of services Microsoft has modeled. It's thousands of services all in all. The GenAI category alone has 809 currently. So I would look through this catalog and maybe preemptively add tags to services I don't want people to use. Tags are a feature of Defender for Cloud Apps. This is basically the integration point with Defender for Endpoint, where we can actually get stuff done. You'll see in a moment what it looks like. But I would go through this list and unsanction together with the customer apps that you don't want people using. A lot of times there's DeepSeek, but there's also a whole lot of other services that we're not going to authorize. Maybe we'll also sanction a few services just to indicate that they are actually official tools. And for ones we're not so sure about, we might make monitored, and I'll show what that means as well in a second. It takes a couple of hours to click through this and discuss, but it's worth it. So it's a good idea to also sanction the apps you are using, for production. Maybe you're using GitHub Copilot Enterprise, for example. There's also a bunch of apps, by the way, that are unblockable, basically, Microsoft's own core apps. So don't be surprised if you can't unsanction them. But here's the thing. Before we get overexcited with just blocking everything, I want to stop this demo to kind of remind everyone of the core principle in security. So all of this security stuff also only works if the secure way of doing things is also the easy way. This second immutable law of security is 24 years old now, I believe. It still holds up. So us will do the easy thing no matter what. I'll actually play a little clip. I interviewed this guy called David Platt. He's software legend. He's a Microsoft software legend, user experience advocate. Let's see what David has to say on this subject. Maybe you'll actually hear this. Maybe you won't. Let's see. Yeah, this is Dave said that users will do whatever is easiest no matter what. I agree. My experience shows that. So basically with this GenAI thing, if we don't want people to use the familiar ChatGPT or Gemini or what have you, we need to make using those a little bit annoying for business data. And we need to make using the business official alternatives really easy. So this applies to all user-facing security, but this especially applies to GenAI services. Because you're fighting against people's preferences, essentially, sometimes. So this is why we end up using risk-based controls, not just categorically saying no to everything and expecting people to change, but giving signals to people. So when we have really high-risk GenAI apps that we noticed in Defender for Cloud Apps, I'll use DeepSeek as an example because it's such a known one. We unsanction it in Defender for Cloud Apps, and that means Defender for Endpoint, when we set it up correctly, like I showed you, will now in fact explain when people try to access the site that this site is not allowed in the organization. A classic no as a service type of solution. Sometimes it's necessary. I try to avoid it, but sometimes it's necessary to say no. Now, sometimes we might have services that are a little bit less risky. I'll talk about how to handle those next, or in the gray area. If you have on-premises firewall solutions, though, you don't have to only rely on Defender for Endpoint, because Defender for Cloud Apps lets you generate a so-called block script for all your unsanctioned apps that you can upload or use in your network appliance, firewall, or some other such network appliance to apply those same controls to any devices that go through the firewall. This is a lesser known feature, but useful if you want to consistently prevent access to certain services. So whenever you unsanction more apps, you need to generate a new block script and apply it in your firewall or other system. Just one that gets overlooked. Continuing on though, we have medium risk systems sometimes, systems that under certain circumstances are okay as long as business data doesn't go in them, or perhaps we want to make people think twice before accessing those services without blocking them outright. Maybe because we're not offering proper enterprise alternatives yet, for example. So in that case, we would set the app in question not to unsanctioned, but monitored in Defender for Cloud Apps. It was another tag, which means Gemini, for example, will tell us that the site is currently blocked, but you're allowed to visit it if you decide to do so, but that will be noticed by the admins. You will only get access for a limited time. The limited time is a number of hours we can configure. Just mentioning that there's also an option to direct people to your own, let's say, intranet policy page or something from this one through a link. I haven't configured it here. So we can let people go through, but let them know that this is not the service we expect them to use. For a lot of people, this makes them think of the alternatives. What am I supposed to be using? People don't like seeing, people don't generally like seeing screens like this every day. Feels kind of bad using services that when you have to go through something like this. So we're nudging people in the less annoying, more safe feeling direction here without absolutely just saying no. But the ultimate goal, I guess, is to still, keep a hold of business data. So we're going to cover that next. All of what we saw so far was covered just by Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Cloud Apps. We didn't even get into Purview yet. So Purview kind of comes into the picture when we start to talk about business data. So the ultimate goal of, I think, for managing GenAI services is to keep business data out of them. I don't think any organization's security teams or risk management teams are worried about people asking for quotes for birthday cards or food recipes from, let's say, DeepSeek. Organizations are worried about business data ending up in those services. So Purview kind of comes in. You might remember that we created an endpoint DLP rule saying confidential content cannot be uploaded to generative AI services. So let's see what that actually looks like. We're in ChatGPT now, consumer version. And we're uploading a business document, a confidential legal agreement, into ChatGPT. Now, this is what risk management is actually afraid of. Endpoint DLP here comes in between, jumps up and kind of lets you know, hey, uploading this document to this service is not according to company policy. We might say just no. Some organizations want to say just a hard no on this one. Some organizations are a bit more curious about why people would even want to use ChatGPT. So we've also implemented what you're seeing here, which is a justification request, where people have to actually say why they want to specifically upload business data to a policy breaking system. We can then look through those justifications in the audit logs. Sometimes people don't have a good explanation and just bang on the keyboard and press allow. So then we can ask more pointed questions from them. This person thinks that ChatGPT is better than Copilot. I won't judge. So Purview kind of endpoint data loss prevention helps people understand that what they're doing is against policy. You can block if you want to, but be careful because the functional alternatives need to be easy and clear when you start blocking. It's actually pretty fast to take these, laptop-based, browser-based cloud services, take control of them. But I don't know, I find myself using ChatGPT and other such consumer services a lot of the time, Copilot also on these things, mobile devices, right? It's not just a laptop. We kind of tend to forget about mobile devices in the security world a lot because a lot of these tools are designed for PCs and MacBooks, Mac OS and Windows. But iOS and Android are there. So when we've needed to extend this kind of business data control to mobile devices, what we've done is we've reached into the Intune toolkit. I know the title of this session is Defender and Purview, but I did want to remind you of the fact that Intune has the tools to help as well, meaning app protection policies. App protection policies have been around for a long while. This is not a new thing. They let us do all kinds of things, but the control we're really looking for in relation to generative AI is the ability of app protection policies to control how data is copied or sent between organizational work apps and other apps. For example, you might have on Android phones a work profile, on iOS phones another work profile, but kind of embedded into the OS. You might have work apps. The Microsoft 365 app, called Microsoft 365 Copilot now, the work Outlook, the work Edge. And then you might have all of the consumer apps on the same phone, like consumer Outlook, your own Outlook, your own Edge, and your personal ChatGPT and Gemini, all of those things, right? So we are kind of creative. If the company says you can't take this business data to ChatGPT on your PC, a lot of people would just open up the phone and try there and say, hey, it works. I won't change anything. So we need to give a clear signal on this side as well. We'll use the app protection policies to say that data can be sent from policy managed apps only to other policy managed apps, and we'll pick up all of the Microsoft work apps into the policy. So create a kind of circle of trust. Microsoft apps are trusted, they can share between each other and the other managed work apps, but they can't send or have information copy pasted to non-policy managed apps on the same device. This is essentially data loss prevention on phones, but it's not called that. It has a different name. This is kind of how it's not as great and granular as DLP, but it still helps make sure that people actually don't try to circumvent an annoyance just by going on a different device. So your policy is for generative AI apps is the same regardless of service. Regardless of device. So this on the left This is actually from a video on YouTube, not from my device. It was just a great screenshot, so I grabbed there. Credit is not mine. From a guy from Microsoft, where the control to restrict sending data to other apps is in effect, where you can only share and send data within the mobile device to other managed work apps. You don't see every ChatGPT and all that on this list here. So, all right, once you have the solution deployed, all of the prerequisites that I mentioned, admins still need to keep an eye on things, right? So aside from the audit logs that you already saw, aside from cloud discovery and what you have there, you also have the data security posture management for AI in Purview portal. This is it's something Microsoft talks about a lot. It's a new thing, but I tend to use this for the reporting side mostly. It's got some good reports on kind of pulling in all the data from the devices, the Purview extension from the devices on what types of information people have been pushing into various cloud services, for example. And which departments have been using generative AI to handle sensitive data and stuff like this. This is a good daily monitoring tool or weekly monitoring tool. We don't really have the time to dig in deep. We might do a full session sometimes about just monitoring. But I wanted to keep this one a bit more short. So kind of to recap before we get a little bit deep into the future. First, you want to onboard the devices to endpoint data loss prevention. Sorry, I actually meant to say Defender for endpoint, a little bit of a brain fart there. You want devices in Defender for endpoint, then in Purview. That gives you the audit data and the ability to apply controls. Then you want to integrate Defender for Cloud Apps with Defender for Endpoint. It's just a couple of settings, takes 5 minutes. That gives you the ability to control specific apps and get information and signals. I do like to create the endpoint DLP rules in simulation mode first. That way you get audit events, information, and the ability to understand how this policy or this DLP rule would actually impact users before you turn it on. Once you're confident that your rule looks, you're confident that you're ready to actually start controlling business data exfiltration to GenAI services, then you can actually enable the endpoint DLP policy with the rules in it. I would give a full month, to be honest, for data to accumulate before starting the discovery work. You can do less if you're in a hurry. But I would focus on the high-risk GenAI services first and have a conversation with the business, not just block things. We need to understand why people are using such and such service instead of what the official toolkit. Because if you just block without understanding why people are using things, people will just find workarounds. So we need to be a bit careful here. Educate people, train them with what Microsoft 365 Copilot, for example, can actually do. Most people don't know about the full capabilities. That's why they might have a bad experience sometimes. Myself, I find myself using it more and more. So once you're kind of confident, you know what the high-risk services are, and you're communicating your authorized services, then it's time to start blocking those high-risk services entirely. But if you're not completely sure you want to block the entire service, then a software touch usually works well. Just give people the signal that they're not supposed to be using this service. You don't need to always block. People will generally steer away from services that are clearly communicated as bad. Like with the pop-ups you saw earlier. Ultimately, it's about people, so ongoing training is necessary. I would monitor, usage trends, especially if you're training users actively. It's interesting to see how people's usage kind of changes over time as you train them up and educate. But Microsoft is putting a lot of development effort into capabilities with which you can control generative AI use and other services. And here's what's coming up down the pipeline that maybe sometimes is already here, but that I'm excited about. I've tested every single one of these 4 things already in practice, and I can say they work. Network data loss prevention is one to really look at. It's a brand new type of way to catch GenAI usage and putting guardrails. Because network DLP looks at the actual network traffic and not browser use or anything like that. So let's say add-ons in Office apps, browser add-ons, anything like that is not a website in itself, but still uses GenAI services in the backend, that can be seen, and you can provide guardrails too with network DLP. I wouldn't be surprised. The initial round of announced integrations, it's with third-party systems like Netscope. I would not be surprised if Microsoft integrates network DLP with global secure access next. That would be a smart move to do. So keep an eye on that one. Also, I don't know if you knew this, but Microsoft is really putting in effort to making Edge for Business a real control plane for GenAI use. So you can have you can sign into Edge for Business, right? There's the little ability to sign in with an account, and if you use your work account, it kind of becomes Edge for Business. So Microsoft is making that signed in browser profile a control plane. When you sign in with your work account, admins can put in guardrails to GenAI service usage. What do you push into ChatGPT? What do you push into Gemini? Then this recently announced, but we're also getting the ability to start looking at the actual prompts, not text that's pasted or files that are uploaded, but the actual prompts people send to consumer services. That's partly tying into the Edge for Business part here. So if people are typing in prompts with business information, sensitive data, sending it to ChatGPT, work-related sensitive information, you can put guardrails on that imminently. It's really, I think that's already been in preview now for a while. Now, insider risk management is something not all organizations are ready to run. It takes a little bit of resources, but if you have an insider risk team in place, we have had success already pulling in indicators for risky GenAI use, like all of these shadow IT services, shadow GenAI services as an indicator, a risk signal into insider risk management as part of the whole package. It's a valuable signal. So if you do run insider risk management, I recommend you look into risky AI usage as a scenario there. It's available now. All right, that's a lot. I will make this little package of information available through my blog. So I'll show the final one after this. If you want to actually connect with me through LinkedIn, ask questions, come chat, and get the slides. So you can scan this QR code. I know it's a bit of ironic for a security guy to show a QR code, but yeah, this one's safe. So that was a lot. I hope you found some of this interesting a little bit. Thank you for having me here at the AI Native Workplace Summit.